Everybody.
Morning.
I just want to say thank you all for joining us at the What Texas Employers Actually Need panel. And I just wanted to say thank you to Hope, Justin, and Laolu also for joining us here. I hope we're going to have a really interesting conversation. I'm the Texas Tribune's economy and industry reporter. My name is Paul Cobbler. That's a big beat, I think, is something that I always tell people when I talk about it. I kind of cover everything that has to do with money under the sun. But obviously, doing this beat, artificial intelligence is the thing that I hear about all the time. And then the big key word is uncertainty. That is just like the word I can't get enough of hearing from all these experts I talk to. And so I think this is a really good conversation to have at this moment in time, given the uncertainty around what is going to happen with work and how basically we can meet that challenge. So I hope we can kind of dig into that a little bit more. And I think that's the excitement of the beat is, I don't think we're going to have all the answers up here, but the next 5-10 years are really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it all. So just so you three know, the microphones are already live, and you guys are free to use those. But I wanted to start with you, Justin, just to kind of build off of what Roberto was talking about. There's so much, and sort of like the name of the panel is like, what do Texas employers actually need? When I hear a lot of folks in this space talk about, whether it's artificial intelligence is going to replace workers, whether it's going to supplement the skills that workers already have to make it easier, I think the question that I always think of is, do Texas employers know what they want yet?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I also want to very quickly just thank Chancellor Reeser and Texas State Technical College and the Dallas Fed and Roberto and all of the great team here that appreciate the opportunity. It's interesting that you said uncertainty. This morning I was thinking, what's the common word there? And that's exactly what I came up with as well. So yes and no by industry. There are going to be some companies that are farther along in the process because of where maybe, I don't know if you call it low-hanging fruit, or the early adapters or industries that adapted more quickly to AI. But of course, it's impossible to say that what we don't know, and I think that we'll have to be ready, and that gets to that workforce issue of not necessarily focusing on training specifically AI in itself, but how the technology and those advanced technologies will continue to just sort of integrate through everything, and it would be I would not be being honest if every company, to say that most companies know exactly what that means yet, but they're learning quickly. And the CEOs, from CEOs, like from groups like ours, to HR, just everyone throughout the company has to be adapting, and I think they are. I think it certainly gets talked about enough, and they're the opportunities. I feel like the narrative now with the general business community is you can be left behind if you're not. So, but what it means, yes and no. It just yes and no, and it depends on the time, and next month it'll be a lot more than it is today.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I kind of figured that the answer would be essentially, we're not too sure yet. But, I think that tees up the next question for Hope or Laolu. I mean, you guys working in this space where you're kind of trying to plan, especially on the community college level, for what employers of the future are going to need. I mean, can you just say more about like how difficult it is when there is this much uncertainty, kind of trying to make these decisions and knowing, every day you have, new students coming up to your school, trying to get the skills they need for the future?
So, the conversation around education and trying to fill the skills gap is essentially what you're talking about. I mean, uncertainty is one word. The term that I would use is rapid change. If you look at AI itself, it's not a new field. We're talking, depending on where you want to categorize where it first started. Was it the gathering at Dartmouth in 1956, or was it Alan Turing who theorized that artificial systems, we all know about the Turing machine and what that meant, but the rapid change has been even more rapid lately. If someone like myself who's been a bit of an AI enthusiast the last couple of years, I know how I thought about AI in January of 2025 is vastly different from how I apply AI today. And so I think for colleges, for businesses, it's sort of standing on the balls of your feet and being ready to adapt to rapid change. The flip side is those employees that we're looking to train a lot of times they're missing from the conversation. I think that's something we could do a better job of. Employees are there, educators are there, the political leadership is there, but the people have to be a part of that conversation. As a training institution, we're learning that very quickly. So institutions, community colleges, I know Alamo College is here, there's some from McLennan Community College. We're all on the balls of our feet trying to figure out where's the puck going to go to next, but we're having to talk to employers who have not fully figured that out. It's not just a fear of being left behind that I think employees have to be worried about. It's the reality that these tools will ultimately transform how work is done, but to what extent we don't fully know. So it's sort of a game where you've got to constantly stay on the balls of your feet and be kind of chasing that around. Even for employers, we've seen a lot of CEOs who sought to deploy AI. I think there was this term, tokenization, was a measure of how they were gauging how effective employees were being in utilizing tokens. So that was their measure of, hey, are you using enough tokens so I know you're deploying AI the way it is? And then companies, 6 months later came back and said, okay, that was a bad idea. So it's that rapidly evolving change that we're having to constantly adapt, learn a little bit better, and figure out exactly what skills your employees are going to need. Without a doubt, AI will be a part of our lives. It's kind of like the way computers became a part of our lives. 50 years ago, no one conceptualized everybody having a computer in their home. I think it's the same way with AI.
Hope, I'd love to hear your answer on that too.
Well, I think back to your original question about what do employers need, and do they know what they need right now? We have the opportunity to work with community colleges across the country, and whether it's Texas or in other states, we see that those conversations with employers have got to happen not only up front, but continually. It has to be, an ongoing conversation because the workforce demands are continuously evolving, and we used to have conversations with groups of employers and say, what do you foresee for the next 3 to 5 years in the particular areas that your company hires entry-level workers? And right now, people are saying 6 months, maybe. I can see that crystal ball is smaller and smaller. And so we hear, with respect to AI, I think you see 3 different areas, and particularly when we're talking with community colleges who say, how do we prepare our students to be AI literate? And that foundational AI literacy, how to use AI as a tool, I think that's a basic piece of skill set that anyone is gonna need going out to today's workplace, because although not all job descriptions reflect AI skills, that's increasing every day. The other thing is, having those, the ability to use AI tools, layer that on top of your discipline-specific skills, because that's what's going to be required in the workplace, and working with employers to understand that, develop some case studies that can be used in the classroom together so students really understand how AI may be applied in their future workplace, and then, colleges using, AI as workflow tools to improve efficiency. There's so many different layers of that. We could spend the whole day unpacking those elements, but I think that uncertainty is real, and so those community partnerships like Advance Together and other partnerships, it takes a village, right, for us all really to collaborate around this, because we can't read every research report that comes out today, or even the AI summary of it. So we've got to collaborate together to really do the work.
Well, and I thought Roberto, sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, Laolu, that's a perfect opportunity for you to talk about, I think the first in the nation, definitely the first in the state, in terms of embedding AI. You need to promote what's going on.
Yeah, certainly. So I serve on the board of Houston City College, formerly Houston Community College. We had the distinction of being the first community college to offer an associate's degree in AI. A little over a year ago, we became the first junior college to offer a bachelor's degree in AI. So we're really leading in the AI space. And then as of this year, we named the first chief AI Innovation Transformation Officer, a dear friend, Elizabeth McGee, who was a career person with Intel. And so HCC is really leaning in on that. But even for us, that rapid change that I talked about, we're trying to figure out how AI, not only in us preparing our students to go work and have high-paying jobs, but how we deploy it as an institution ourselves to transform every element of dealing with internal and external stakeholders. So Justin, thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't think want it to be controversial. I just think certainly in associates in AI and can take you in different directions. But I think that what HCC is doing is so incredibly helpful. What you brought up is that Elizabeth will be looking at all of the programs and how each one is going to separately, as of August 2026, need to be able to use AI in that field and talk with employers and see that constant improvement chain. And it's really impressive what's going on there.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you for teeing that up too. I think something that we all remember, like 2021, 2022, when ChatGPT was really the first kind of generative AI to come onto the marketplace, and sort of everyone, at first it was just kind of like a gimmick, and we've all seen how much that has changed over like 5 years. And I just would love to hear more about kind of like what you guys saw when you were starting this program, because that's such a short time ago from now, and sort of like how you were able to develop that as quickly as you have, and like sort of how you're tweaking it. Like how is that sort of working in its like earliest stages at this point?
I mean, the short answer, there were a lot of smart, visionary people who saw this as a need and decided to move in. I couldn't take credit for I didn't get on the board till January of 2024, but there were some very smart, intentional people, and you had the right environment where you had leadership supported and said, hey, let's lean in here. AI as a field it's not new. Like, all of us talk about, I think the best example I can give is when you went and shopped on Amazon a decade ago and they said people who bought this also liked this. That was all AI, and we were all getting tricked into all these different elements, and there are other examples of it. So I think we saw that clearly as an institution. And, and it's not just the associate's degree. We have everything from a level 1 to a level 2 certificate. So there's a stepwise process where people can come in. There's an AI Essentials course that with 3 courses, you can rapidly get some credential value that you can apply to go to work. And so now the challenge is, and I've shared this publicly, it's not enough to say we were first. How do we continue to lead in that? And that's where people like Elizabeth McGee come in. And to the other employers who are looking for wonderful institutions that you might want to partner with, HCC wants to continue to be at the frontier of that. So we welcome input and other partnerships. And talking about partnerships, we just received a $17 million grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies, which it's a performance-based grant, but that's supposed to help us really deploy workforce. There are a few other partnerships that are being announced as things move forward. So HCC, we're excited about what's there, but we also recognize that change is constantly happening, and we have to stay on the leading edge.
I was just going to say that we've had the opportunity to work with Miami-Dade College, who has been collaborating with Houston City College and the Maricopa Colleges in Arizona around a National Science Foundation initiative called the National Applied AI Consortium, and it's a great resource. So anyone from workforce development and community colleges who is looking for a group of partners and a network to really reach out to and share those best practices as well as lessons learned, it's something to take a look at, because when the consortium first started, each of the 3 colleges that are leading this effort, they were very much focused on the AI needs of the employers in their community. So it was not the same program at each institution. It had different foci, and those stackable credentials were so critical, and that's one of the things that Miami learned, even though they developed out a full bachelor's degree. It was that first credential that folks with bachelor's degrees were coming back to college to get that to layer on top of their discipline-specific skills. So I would say this, what those AI needs are for your local employers is going to vary from community to community, and that's really, you got to have those specific conversations to find out what those needs look like.
I was going to add that some of the things I've heard, that employers have, since as long as I've been with the TBLC, there's this need to be able to grow and expand. You need a talented workforce, and building a workforce is a competitiveness issue. We're not just competing. There was a time in our state's history we would be competing with neighboring states and maybe the rest of the country in some industries, but it's a global economy. We're competing globally, and there's only a matter of how much workforce you have, prepared workforce, skilled workforce, and there are, of course, other things that we're involved in, water supply, other big issues that are critically important. But we have to have employers then be willing to talk with the academic institutions, and that's a key. That's a key thing. I think it was 2007, I believe, when we were asked to come in and work with the higher education coordinating board, and we had a great conversation with many of our members, mostly CEOs, about big picture issues, what we needed. And then they asked the question, okay, what now? We're trying to work on some knowledge skills, what you're going to need in 5 years. And conversation sort of ended right there. I mean, and that was in 2007. So it was already a difficult conversation to predict what you're going to need that far. And now it's what you're going to need, what you said, less than 6 months, or maybe in 6 months. So it goes back to that. But what you can do is, I think employers have to take responsibility too on their side, is that we have got to continue to work with the TSTC system, our local community colleges, and four-year universities, all across the board. We just have to be sure that we're working together in partnerships, because we need what employers hope for is just institutions that will change with them as we grow, because that is the heart of that uncertainty is the change, and fast change, rapid change, rapid growth. So we're gonna have to just all be on both of our feet, like you said, just move.
Absolutely, and the idea of rapid change is not a new concept. When you think about 2008, when the rest of the country was going through an economic collapse, what happened in Texas? Well, George Mitchell had figured out horizontal drilling. Like, fracking became what we had to adapt to, and that spurred on new companies where they had to come up with different techniques, different technologies. So it's been a constant part of our economic evolution. If you think about, we started out as an agrarian society. We were talking about this at dinner last night. Before that, we foraged to feed ourselves, right? And then eventually we got into farming, laboring for your fruit. And then eventually we got to enjoying the fruits of our labor through the Industrial Revolution. And so rapid change has always been constant. It's happening in a shorter time span, and the impacts reverberate across a much larger span. Now it's global. It's no longer these microcosms where we have to adapt to change locally.
Data centers weren't controversial enough, so you brought up fracking, so that's good.
Well, in this discussion of the rapid changes, like just listening to all three of you just now, we just talked a lot about community colleges and sort of their role in responding to this. And, I think universities kind of have the reputation for being institutions, for being a little bit slower to change. But I thought from Roberto's presentation, he really made the point that these effects are going to be felt from, the truck drivers all the way up to a computer, scientist. And I just wonder, we could start with you, Hope, for y'all, like how you guys sort of think about the role that both community colleges and universities have to play here, and like why community colleges are better equipped to be able to respond to these changes quickly.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there, but I would say community colleges, they really sit in that sweet spot. They're at the intersection there between secondary and they're the bridge to higher education. They're oftentimes the best convener in a community. They're oftentimes the ones that have the closest partnerships with workforce agencies, with community organizations who are helping them deliver wraparound services to make sure that their students persist and complete. But then I think we really need to think about, too, it's that we have what we call our framework for career pathways alignment, which was really an organizing structure for partnerships at the community level. So what about our design of pathways from high school all the way to university? That's got to be something that we look at as a community, sit down with all of those higher education and school districts together, and then really make sure that employers are at the table throughout that conversation. Because I can tell you, employers are tired of answering those same questions 3 times. So being able to have those pathway design conversations at the community level really makes a difference, because community colleges have the ability to design short, stackable credentials that lead to multiple degrees. It's really an opportunity for them to be more nimble and responsive, and that's evident here by this, certainly by the campus at TSTC and their long legacy of doing that, but that's really what it takes, and we're really seeing a resurgence of that right now.
Yeah. I'll add this perspective. I mean, just being candid, community colleges are not as fast to adapt as we might advertise. If we're being candid, they're
y'all are good at this advertising.
Well, they're bureaucratic structures. I mean, anybody who leads workforce development, I see Frank here, an idea gets germinated, and then you have to go through layers till it gets to the right person who now says, yeah, that's not going to happen a year, perhaps. I'll give you an example. Tesla approached HCC last year, summer, fall, and they were like, hey, we want to train people to be mechanics, to work. They were opening up a new facility out, I think, in Brookshire. And so they came to us, and the conversations were happening, and the fallback was, well, yeah, we could do that. Let's see if we can start something, maybe by the next school year, which would have been starting like just now in August. But it took them saying, well, we don't have that long to wait. Why can't we start by January? And that was what lit the fire. You had to have the right atmosphere where the right leadership people were at the table. And as a board, I think we conveyed sufficiently to the administration that we're not going to have inertia stop us from moving things forward. Long and short of it, the first set of graduates graduated by this summer, simply because someone was intentional enough to advance the ball. The other thing that community colleges have to reconcile with, even when you come up with these ideas with partners, you still have to make them a credential of value. You have to submit that to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, who has to now certify that. So there's steps that we have to take. So I don't want anyone to leave with the impression that community colleges are just great. Yes, we function a little bit better than four-year institutes because it's not designed for that. But there's still some work that we need to partner with the Texas Business Council, to partner with the legislature. If we're going to meet the pace at which change is happening in industry, we as institutions or organs of government have to be even more adaptable in a more efficient manner.
Well, I certainly respect that as a trustee. I will also, the opposite side of that coin is they have been moving pretty quickly, though, lately. With House Bill 8 and outcomes-based funding models, incredible growth and success over the last 2 years, and that's another story. They've had quite a bit of success in terms of outpacing funding that was appropriated, but the TBLC and many other groups in this room, if I start naming them, I won't be able to name them all, so I won't, but really worked to build out the community college finance system, a new system that was not created when these community college systems were. It's something that was needed for the 21st century, and outcomes funding is at the base of that. We've only been a public policy type organization. This is really the first piece of legislation that once it was passed, we decided to help support the implementation, working with Business Roundtable, who there's 27 groups like ours around the country. Business Roundtable in DC is, I guess, we're not affiliated, but we work very closely together. And we're working with them, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and a wonderful group called Business Higher Education Forum that works with Business Roundtable, and have gone around. We started in El Paso, San Antonio, North Texas. We're now in Far East Texas and in the Houston area, working with community colleges on extra support, some of it started with just what is the first month after the bill passed, or the first couple of months after, what House Bill 8 is, these are the things, how you're going to build in the program into your system. But it's really evolved into now helping with knowledge, skills, abilities, and having employer validation sessions, and just quickly moving. So, for sure, they're I wouldn't say as fast as they could be, but I have to give them the other side of that coin again, is that they are moving pretty quickly and doing a lot of good things. And then you have another point that was mentioned earlier, and I hope I'm not flipping to a different area, but really we don't know in terms of the uncertainty what jobs will be created. With AI, we were just, however many years ago, I don't want to say the wrong way, but before we had the skill of flight, we did not know about pilots or aircraft mechanics. And then you have TSTC has, I believe the chancellor said, almost or over 30% of the construction is training and skills for the entire state is done through this system. We just, all of the things we don't know that we're just learning, what kind of jobs there will be in the future. And just very quickly, it's real special that I'm here. My dad was owned a construction company when the peso devalued in the 1980s in Mexico. We're in the South Texas in the Valley. He needed to do something different. He was hired to help build out a construction technology program for Texas State Technical Institute before they changed the name to college. in Harlingen, and it was a small warehouse shared with the peace officers training program, and I would go in the summer and sometimes stay out there. And then to see this, I wish you could have seen it. This is, it's just so good for the state. I mean, period. It's just so good for the state to have this kind of work. And this is just one building of many buildings, and so we should all be very proud of the system and our community colleges and our 4 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that like one of the one of the things that I'm thinking about here when you guys are kind of talking about this bottom-up approach and sort of, you just made the point there, Justin, that like the jobs of the future haven't been created yet. And, when we're thinking about the efforts that legislators at the federal government can do, this conversation is starting to build as far as needing to support this kind of workforce development in this age of AI. What is that best government approach in your mind? Is it just more funding? Like, how can government be supportive here, but also stay out of the way to allow that kind of local flexibility that Roberto was discussing?
We are not a group that always, our first answer is additional funding in terms of government. But I will say in this, a different situation was needed, more funding was needed. And this is just for the community colleges, not to take any away from any other of the institutions. But with community colleges, it was a very antiquated system, and they outperformed, the community colleges outperformed in the first session, and so in 2025, January 2025, a supplemental budget had to be passed, $80–90 million to cover the overages, and now it's looking like it's going to be a significant amount more. We just need to tell the story, or remind Texas legislature, everyone, that where we were headed, the trajectory we were headed before House Bill 8, before we had a new system, the number of students leaving graduates from high school going to either a community college or TSTC, the majority of our high school graduates that were going on to post-secondary. And if we want to return to the trajectory we had, then let's not fully fund, but we've got to fund the outcomes, and that is a fiscally conservative thing to do. Now, no doubt, the model and the metrics are going to have to be tweaked and changed, and we knew that. There are programs that were created that had never been tracked before. So when you're trying to track these programs, or not track, but project the dollars that were going to be needed in 2027 budget, 2026, 27, 28, 28, it was very, very difficult, if not impossible. So I think we're just the growing pains right now, but I will say that that's, again, never usually our answer, additional funding, but we need to stay the course with making sure that the institutions have the resources they need, and that they stay focused on labor market information and regional demand, and that they're helping individuals be able to build a career and a life for themselves. I mean, and that's a win-win-win for employers, employees, and institutions who are now being funded by outcomes and performance. So in this case, I will say that the government shouldn't, the legislature does a really good job working with in terms of what the metrics are going to be, and there's groups, again, I just saw someone walk in that does a lot of work on the metrics and the weighting, and that still has to be tweaked and figured out, but we'll get there, and it was just an initial projection that wasn't maybe as accurate as it could have been, and that's not to anyone's fault, but now we're at a situation where we're going to have a big funding gap, and so my hope is that in January the legislature will have a supplemental budget to cover what is necessary, and I hope that the community colleges are felt that they're taken care of because of the work they've done. That I don't want to say owed, but that they've done a lot of work, but it's really what the focus should be on. If we don't continue providing these resources, that we made it was a unanimous vote in the House to pass House Bill 8. And if we don't want to go back, and I think maybe we just need to remind everyone who's making these decisions of why this new system was in place. And these are not wasted government dollars. These are dollars that are really, really helpful. And I'm glad and proud of what this legislature did with TSTC last session. So we're moving in the right direction, and I'm positive we'll get there.
Well, and I guess what I'm kind of getting at, and like what I'm thinking about is, we're talking about making sure everybody's rowing in the same direction, right? And Hope, in the Waco Chamber, you had written that no single institution or sector is equipped to address these workforce problems alone. And, I think that just gave me questions. Like, I was just thinking, like, well, whose job is that to make sure that everybody is rowing in the right direction? And how do we make sure that is happening, essentially?
Well, I think we all have to own it, right? Because given the pace of technological advancement, technology adoption, and what AI is doing to our workplace every day, we have to be able to really have that co-leadership approach and that community approach to the talent development needs of our region. And I think that's something that sometimes we dismiss, and sometimes we don't have those conversations because we assume we know. And it's dangerous to do that. It's also dangerous to guess. So having those very specific conversations, we have the opportunity a lot of times to come into communities and help them focus on strategic employer engagement around the business and industry leadership team model, which really gets to the heart of what are those knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need workers to have not just today, but 12 to 36 months into the future, and have specific enough conversations that we can get to that.
If I could add to it, I think it's three things I would ask of the legislature. Provide the resources that are necessary for, in this case, community colleges, who are the primary vehicle that we have to try to train and deploy this future workforce that we're talking about as being vital to our economic competitiveness globally going forward. So you provide the resources. Two, provide a level playing field in terms of a regulatory framework. Think through the rules, set the rules, and abide by what you establish as the rules. You can't change it, because planning depends on that so that we all have predictability around what we have to do. And then thirdly, sort of like do no harm. Once you've done those two things, allow these institutions to have the flexibility to go do what they need to do. So reducing the barriers, whether it's funding sources, the discussions about tuition caps and so on and so forth, those are things that tend to get in the way for community colleges and institutions to be able to fulfill this mandate that they've been given statutorily. And so those would be the three things that I'd say is provide the resources, set a regulatory framework, and get out the way and reduce the barriers.
That's a great point. I mean, this House Bill 8 was passed in 2023, so the rules weren't even, we're talking 24, 25. This is not something that was done in the 90s that we're, and to answer your other question of why, I guess I did, employers have to step up. It's all of the above, as you said. And there have to be, and some companies have incredible, I won't say Bell Helicopter, Lockheed Martin, they have these incredible programs, and there are other employers that aren't going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to build a lab for themselves, but they can reach out and work with institutions, and those institutions can reach out and work with employers. And one thing we're proud of is we're working with Business Higher Education Forum. The TBLC created a playbook for community colleges and how to work with employers. It has templates and how to reach out. And if anyone wants my information should be that we can provide that to anybody. And so it is a sort of one place we hope it'll be a living document. We can adapt it, but it's how institutions can work with employers, and we are always talking to our employers about how we can help them reach out to who they need to. But I don't think there's not one. I mean, I guess the bully pulpit would be our state leaders, but elected leaders. But they do a good job of understanding. They know we're only as good as our workforce and our critical infrastructure. And
I was going to share, there's a couple of examples that come to mind for me here in Texas in terms of that collaboration of employers and colleges. And Austin Community College's biotech program is a great example. They've been around, they instituted that program in the late 90s, but in addition to preparing technicians for the biotechnology field, they started a biotech incubator in 2017, and it's been just a game changer for biotech startups, for those small and mid-sized businesses, because the biotech industry is growing by leaps and bounds, and Texas is now ranked third in terms of the state that's leading in that particular industry. But the equipment that it takes to train people to work in that field is just, so, in terms of the magnitude compared to other, especially two-year programs, it's huge. It's sometimes insurmountable. So having that opportunity for small companies to get started in that incubator, to be able to share those labs with students and be exposed to that, that's something that ACC has really leaned into. It's made a huge difference. And then San Jacinto in the Houston area has been working really around the cell and gene therapy area, and it's been growing and growing, and existing companies like Eli Lilly are taking note of that, coming to town and working with the college to train that workforce before that plant is even open. So that's something that's going on this month, and Eli Lilly hasn't even yet opened their doors. So I think, lots of examples of innovation, but it's got to be what's going to make the most sense for your region.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit, unless either of you all have something else to add on this. But, one of the things that I am thinking about, like I'm happy to represent the late 20s audience up here on stage.
Me too.
Me too.
Yes. Okay, yeah, thank you. And, what I hear from a lot of my friends when we talk about like the rise of AI is sort of this feeling of like, who is this for? I think when you hear these tech CEOs talk about it, it's, no one is ever gonna work again and we're all gonna lose our jobs, and, it's very pie in the sky, or I guess that could also be doomsday depending on how you think about it. But like, I think a lot of people struggle to sort of know where this is going to take us and what it's going to mean for your own future. And so I think like thinking about sort of the opportunities and upward mobility, especially for those kind of like working class people, like what does that look like? Especially when so much is changing in this field, and kind of like knowing what those jobs of the future are. Like how do we center upward mobility and creating opportunity for people as so much changes in the economy? And we can start with you, Laolu. Or Hope, please.
I think Hope was ready.
Hope went for the mic.
I'll just say, we have to democratize access to AI, right? And we really have to. Everyone's lives are being touched by AI, whether you know it or not. And I think being able to have that, the barrier to AI entry is very low, right? And the U.S. Department of Labor created an AI framework and a text-based on your phone AI course that's being used in workforce development programs across the country, and even by a colleague of mine who's a retired president from the Dallas system. She's using it with the food pantry clients at her church because they've got a cell phone. It's something that they can, learn very easily. Now, of course, that's just an awareness level, but that is so important, right? Because the more awareness you have, then that ethical and the responsibility use then comes into play, which gets to some of your questions you were saying, where are we headed with this, right? So those foundational skills, but then also how do we use this as a tool ethically and responsibly in our day-to-day? So I think with access and then that ethical and responsible use thing has got to be early on for everyone.
Well, and please. No, I am curious because I'd be remiss, when we're in a technical college, we're talking a lot about AI, but obviously the infrastructure that's powering that is data centers, and that has been a huge topic of discussion in the state of Texas. And something I hear from a lot of these technology companies is their need for plumbers that kind of work these water systems and electricians that deal with all of the many wires running through a data center to get power to these different things. And There have been a number of programs that have been announced by a lot of these companies to create training programs to fill these roles, but I think it's kind of a mixed bag. Like I've heard different opinions on if there is truly a shortage. There's also, they're paying a lot more, and so it is making it more challenging for home builders to be able to get the workers that they need to be able to do their work. I'm naming a lot of different things, but I think the kind of point I'm trying to make is it's challenging right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is true. I mean, the premise of your question about who's AI for, so the theoretical framework is we're deploying AI so that humans don't have to do so many of these jobs, yet we need humans so that we can't have AI, right? Because AI can't build its own data centers. So like that's just a fundamental thing. I mentioned to people earlier, it is true that plumbers, electricians are being pulled off of job sites because they can get paid more out in West Texas. It's no different than what happened during fracking, where construction workers were, heading out to go drive $100,000 trucks because they could make money out in the oil patch. So how did we get here? It's sort of question I think it's worth us reflecting on. Watson was on Jeopardy 2011 or something like that, and I think it won. And I actually knew I know one of the engineers who was on that IBM team with Watson. And then there was a competition where AI defeated some chess grandmaster. I can't remember the grandmaster's name. China saw that, and they decided then and there that this was going to be the biggest challenge that we had. And so we got into this race unwittingly because China moved fast, and I think it forced us to have to move fast to catch up. It's no different than what happened with nuclear proliferation. I mean, if we're being candid about it, countries are worried about not being left behind and what the competitive advantage is going to be. So we've gone out to try to be on the frontier, leading edge of AI. The reality is, if you really understand how these AI systems work, there's still a long ways to go. And I've had debates about when do we get to AGI, and people are now redefining what they consider AGI. And AGI is when supposedly they're smarter than we are. If you look at how many of you utilize in your work Claude or ChatGPT with some regularity? Okay. Those same people, how often does it drift off into no man's land that you're like, hey, I just want to do this thing. We don't need to build this new. You've all seen those prompts. Oh, I think you've stumbled on something much more important here. And I'm like, no. I just want this report. Like, I only have 20 minutes to do this thing. Right, so they drift, they're clunky, and you think you build it and you can just set it aside and go on. It's like, no, you get an email, hey, it failed to run, and so now you have to take time to go correct it. So I think the reality is it's still evolving so much, and ultimately, I just think it becomes like what the computer is. If I asked most of you, how many of your companies still have a receptionist or someone who answers phones? We invented these things that were supposed to do all the things, because at the time it was, can you type 90 words per minute? Now you have your own calendar, you have your own phone, your own email, your own fax machine. You carry all of this around with you, yet we still have people who have to serve in those functions. I think that's ultimately what AI is going to be. It's going to supplant a lot of the functions that are very manual and tedious. However, human input and human judgment, more than anything else, is still going to be vital. Now, I hope someone proves me wrong that in 10 years I don't have to work, because I am certainly looking forward to it. Like, I'm a great dinner conversationalist. I enjoy wine. So if anybody has that role for someone who doesn't need to work in 10 years, just keep Laolu in mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no way sommeliers are being replaced by AI, so. Well, and we're getting pretty close to the 15-minute mark before we get to Q&A. So I just wanted to finish with a question for each of you to kind of build on that. I'd love to hear, starting with you, Hope, do you use AI at work, and how has that changed over the past couple of years?
Yes, I do use AI for work, and I think that sometimes exposure to a lot of tools, sometimes, it's like boiling the ocean and you don't know which one to start with. We've had the opportunity to be involved with some of our colleagues through NSF, National Science Foundation projects, introducing AI tools to community college faculty. Let's see how we can use this with curriculum. And there are so many different avenues that you can take, right? So thinking about what makes the most sense, what still keeps the learning as the learning, right? And we've tried to, as an organization, not necessarily set a policy that you have to use this tool or that you have to use Microsoft because it's built into Office 365, right? You decide based upon the task of your day to day, right? Which tool, try it out, try something else out, and see what's best for you. But really being able to know when to use it and when not to use it sometimes is the most important, right? And you can go on those rabbit trails. You may ask for, an answer to a single question, and it may give you a proposal, for a new construction technology center, and you're like, well, we have $50,000 for this grant. I don't think that's gonna cut it. So we have to, kind of scale back our expectations, and you have to be really precise. So it's a collaborative tool that can be of great value if used right and responsibly. But, you know, there's there's definitely some considerations that we need to have always present, and using that human judgment at all times.
Justin, do you use AI at work, and how?
We do, but we have not fully integrated it into everything yet. It's mostly a tool for helping with writing and some of the research we do. But we're closing in on being able to move into some other areas. But it's just I guess we're still in the do a lot of work on it and do a lot of research around the workforce in AI. But and we do it. It has been helpful. It's saved. I can see the time efficiency aspect of it, but the full effect that I think it will have for us and small nonprofits and organizations and small companies is going to be very meaningful. But only if there is. I'm glad you said another word. You said that judgment that is we have to have the. I mean, it can go off in different directions, and it's so much better than it was 6 months ago. I think I've seen when the different levels come out, or I forget what they're called, but so yes and no, but we'll continue.
We're using AI extensively in our operations. I mean, it's important. I mean, we use it in a sandbox. So let me clarify: it can't access certain systems, but we use it. We're in the construction business, so project management, tracking invoices, contractors. We spent quite a bit of time this summer setting up these systems and workflows that we plan to fully deploy so that much of our business will run on that. The last point that I'll make about AI, I think just like we have base curriculum in high school that requires people to take math and writing, I think AI should become required curriculum, because humans as a whole, all the people that we're working to try to fill the skills gaps for, they need a basic understanding of how you have to apply logic to utilize these tools. And I think that's what the difference maker is going to be. You could develop expertise in these different areas, whether it's healthcare, whether it's biotechnology, engineering, but it's being able to apply that logic model to utilize the tool to support the work that you're doing.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're working, others are working to having some discussions right now about embedding into our TEKS, our Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, into the K-12 program, some AI literacy and models, AI ethics, and everything else into the appropriate levels of school, throughout the secondary school. So, yeah, I agree, and I think it's coming, but we'll have our next legislative session in January. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Matthew, we have some Q&A.
Excellent. So just a reminder for those online, I know we have a graphic to be able to get you to texastribune.org/ask, and a reminder for those in the room, it's that QR code right on the program where you could submit your questions. We have about 15 minutes here before a brief break, but the title of this panel was what Texas employers actually need, and I want to, just based on some questions here, kind of talk about what Texas employees or potential employees actually need. And one of them, when you all have talked about systems, partnerships, the kind of role of educational institutions and employers, how do we think about, at a state and community level, cultivating a thriving workforce in terms of systems of support? And Laolu, I mentioned that in part because of some of the work that you're doing regarding economic mobility, but really a question for anyone about how else we're thinking about investments that are needed for employees or potential employees.
Yeah, so I didn't get a chance to. So in my day job, I'm at the intersection of housing and economic mobility. I also serve on the Harris County Housing Authority Board. So you get to see this full continuum of the people that I keep referencing. And when you look at how transformational education is to people's lives, the next best thing other than that primary education that they get essentially is the secondary academic opportunities that they can tap into, because you take people from low-wage jobs, if they can find the right pathway to get into the right skills job setting, that one person can fundamentally alter the trajectory of their family. People don't realize that there are folks who've lived in affordable housing, and let's just call it what they are, Section 8-based housing for so long that they're multi-generational people who have lived there. And so you have, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, my office is in 3rd Ward in Houston, so I'm very close to this, where you see how important it is that we find ways to break those cycles of poverty. And so, and it's not enough to just get one person to college. It's how do you use that as a lever to extract more people within that lineage to provide those opportunities. And so that's my real concern about who's missing from this conversation. And we have to figure out ways to meet them where they are. And so part of, I think, our role as leaders is figuring out who are some of the people who are closer to those folks who can better deliver the message. Me showing up once a month is not going to do it. So maybe it's that social worker that we're inviting into the conversation around AI, or that person who offers tutoring and after service, or those nonprofits who provide after school services and programming. They have to be part of this conversation, because planting those seeds very early on fundamentally could alter the outcome there. And there's a lot of talent out there. The missing link is the access to opportunity.
We can't go back to the time when we were tracking students, and that wasn't that long ago. Based on the zip code, you had these opportunities. That's just, we cannot go back there. One, it's immoral and unethical. It's also does not make any sense economically. We need all Texans to be able to, have a skill and be able to provide for themselves. It's just, again, a win-win-win. And I think that it's good, very good point. I just agree with you both on very good points on access and opportunity. We have to continue to make sure that this is not another area where large sections of our population don't have access or are left behind or don't feel that it's for them. Those kinds of things. We can't go back there. It's very important.
I think we have to design on-ramps for all Texans to get on the career pathway of their choice, right? And if that means adult education and workforce development collaboration to get them on the path first, I mean, that's what it takes.
Are there any specific partnerships or initiatives that you've seen that if nothing else, for people here or watching online can use to begin to understand what some of this may look like?
Yeah, I don't think any singular partnership comes to mind. I just think about the different nonprofits, and I don't want to talk about Houston nonprofits because it's really nothing that everyone else here would understand. But I think about organizations like Collaborative for Children, who are early on involved in pre-K education, and they're partnering with daycares to try to improve outcomes for young early learners. But to the point that was just made, the adult learners also a big gap. Right, there are a lot of, my grandfather's 96 years old, and I remember a decade ago he was visiting Houston, and he compels my younger sister to come to our home because he would stay with us and teach him how to use a laptop. And I'm sitting here like it was such a fascinating thing to watch that someone in their 80s was learning how to use a laptop, and then eventually figured out how to text, and then now he's sending me videos on WhatsApp and all kinds of things. So, there are these opportunities where we have a lot of adult learners that, that we're missing. And really think when we talk about adult learners, don't think of necessarily, late career people. There are a lot of folks between 20 and 35 who just missed that opportunity to get on that on-ramp you described. And so we have to figure out through whether it's the, NAACP, Urban League, United Way, you name it, food banks, et cetera. These are all potential partners because these are all organizations that touch people. And so it's how do we invite them into the conversation to say, hey, as they do that grocery pickup, here's a QR code, let them scan it. They can get access to some tool that starts to help educate them about the possibilities of technology.
Yeah, and I think making careers visible to all populations. I was visiting with a team who had just finished a career fair night, and they said, we had a lot of interest, we had a big turnout, but we actually signed up more parents for this potential, kickoff of this new program than we did their students, because there were so many opportunities for adult learners, and they were like, wow, why did I not know about this?
Obviously, a lot of appropriate attention around AI skills and literacy. But Sarah from Houston asks, what skills do employers kind of need besides AI skills? And it's the soft skills conversation. And I guess with that, is attention to that being lost, or with limited attention span of like, we need these skills versus soft skills, and how are you all looking at that?
I would say we hear both sides of the equation, the technical skills and the soft skills, which we usually call employability skills, but adaptability, flexibility, problem solving, those are going to continue to be critical, and even more so with the adoption of AI tools. So,
I think thoughtfulness is a skill that employees need. We all go through it. You hire people, you can have your training protocol, but their day-to-day relies on their ability to think through, understand what your organization's, core mission is and what the functional role is required. What part of this ecosystem does our department help make better? So thoughtfulness is the only description that I can kind of come up with. Like, be able to think through, we've given you the basic rules of, here's the big picture, what we do, here are the rules of how we have to operate. Now you have to be able to apply some thoughtfulness and reasoning through, how do you help us solve problems? How do you help us solve problems we're not even aware of? So that's what I would think a lot of employees are thinking about.
I'll add one more. Our friends at Trellis, durable skills, and I think that's important because they're not soft skills. They're things that are durable that will last your entire life. And I always want to add one thing. Look to your left and your right. You're going to see work-based learning programs, and it's not just, it's here. It's incredibly important. But in banks, we need to exponentially expand our work-based learning, and as part of our programs throughout. And the community colleges, obviously TSDC is home run, but we need to make sure that those programs, and again, some employers can participate in that, some can't based on their size, but those durable skills, along with on-the-job training, can be done through work-based learning, and that's just a key element.
So with that in mind, and it is an incredible reminder of where that hands-on training is required, but Chad from Waco also asks, what role will online education play in meeting the needs of Texas employers, and what are the limits do you perceive in some of those online teaching modalities?
I would say that the hybrid approach, especially to technical programs, is best. We've seen a lot of colleges have success teaching the lecture portion, if you will, through online instruction, but being able to have that hands-on in the lab time as a cohort really does make a difference, especially certainly in the skilled trades, but with any technical program.
Yeah, I'd say on the online courses are great for flexibility, but I think in person you still need that context. So I would encourage any young person who's pursuing some program, if there are opportunities to actually be in person and it's a hybrid course, don't just opt for the online. And I teach as well, and I know it's very challenging teaching in strictly an online modality versus having students in a room where you're able to engage. I wanted to clarify my answer. I said thoughtfulness. I think a well-rounded way of thinking is more how I would succinctly put that. Not just thoughtfulness, a well-rounded way of thinking. So for that question, I think it was Sarah from Houston. A well-rounded way of thinking is what's essential.
Thank you. We have time for one last question, and it's a big one that I imagine will be part of even the conversations we're having gathered here in Waco. It's a question from Austin of how do you remove stigmas from hiring practices that degrees from four-year universities mean you're more qualified? And perhaps, and I'm not speaking for this person, Austin, but the other side of, as we're prioritizing, the skills and credentials that are possible with other pathways, does the value, what does that mean for the value of a four-year degree from a university?
I don't think it diminishes the value of a four-year degree at all, but I think the skills-based hiring conversation is one that continues to grow and should grow. And the original question, what about the stigma that you have to have a four-year degree? That's something that our organization has been, beating our head against the wall for decades because of the value that technicians have to so many businesses. But a lot of times, unless you are really looking at the competencies they bring to the table and are just only looking at that, paper ceiling, we're not employing those who are prepared to do a lot of those jobs. So it requires education, but here again, the collaboration, and we've seen over time, the more employers develop those programs in partnership with colleges, they see it as their program. It's a co-leadership approach, and they realize these students, because they're exposed to the students, help, giving them internships or other work-based learning experiences, they see they have the skills, right? And, over time, then working with HR departments and hiring managers to make sure that those job descriptions reflect the skills and not necessarily just, start with the blanket prerequisite requirement that is probably misaligned.
Yeah, it has taken a long time to remove that stigma. It's still going to be there, and I don't know it'll ever completely go away, but these are great jobs we're talking about, and I think when more and more people understand that sometimes when you're at an event or a meeting or a school conference, the plumber and the welder make the most money in the room of anybody else in the room. And these are jobs that are not just critically important for our community. They're very high-paying jobs and have a lot of high, future, maybe now more than ever, upside. But it just takes some time to realize that we need advanced degrees. We need all of the above, and it should be based on what you mentioned, what opportunity you want and what you pursue, and if you succeed, or if you want to shift. But it just takes time. But I think it's changing faster than I've ever seen it in the last 20 years now. People realizing that, well, maybe I don't need the 4-year degree, or I don't. And I think we'll get that change will happen.
Yeah, I'm going to be on the side of, I think the stigma is on both sides. On the one end, it's, oh, you don't have a 4-year degree, but now people are saying, oh, you have a 4-year degree in history, but I make more than you, right? And I think there are a lot of people with 4-year degrees who are like, I've got, or even a master's degree, and I'm having to go do something that just requires a skill. So I would put in the plug for the 4-year degree. I think a well-enlightened citizenry is still essential for a fully functional society. The value of a 4-year degree is not simply a discipline. It's, I think, cultivating your ability to think critically, to think philosophically, and to have a well-rounded understanding of the world and the environment in which we're all in. My undergraduate degree is in biotechnology, but it's those analytical thinking skills that I get to apply in the trade that I'm in today. So I certainly want to put in a plug for the 4-year institutions. I think it's still vital. We need thinkers, we need philosophers. All these AI models that we're talking about, they're being trained by people with 4-year degrees because they have the reasoning skills. They're the ones who are setting up the rules-based society that AI models are being driven on.